Hello, welcome to my channel A Book Forest. My name is Kim, and today I'm going to be talking about my favorite nonfiction books. I know that November is a month that a lot of people read nonfiction. I'm not one to go thematically necessarily, but I do feel the urge to read nonfiction more in the winter than in the summer. So they're not in any particular order. I have 8 nonfiction book I've read that I want to talk about, and there's two more that I want to read, so I'm going to mention them at the end. So the variety of my nonfiction, mostly I read either like biographies or autobiographies. I read some classics, like the classics, the Greek Roman classics. I read history and mostly like British history. And also I read some real fiction, like it's not fiction, but it's the story of someone's, like an event in someone's life, or someone recounting what happened to them at a point in their lives. So I'm gonna start with the classics because they're the oldest. My first one is my favorite of the genre of classics is the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides. That's the French version. This is my favorite because it kept me enthralled. I was reading it in the bus going to work, and I was really interested. Like I've read a few, like I've read Herodotus, the histories, and it's not as good in my opinion. So this recounts the Peloponnesian War, basically the history of the war between Athens and Sparta. And it's 50 years after the war with the Persians. So I thought it was so well recounted. It was very enthralling. Like the battles were really interesting. I'm sure there's a lot of fantasy writers that have read this and really thought the battles were quite epic. I even like them better than the Iliad and the Odyssey. The Iliad has loads of battles, but the ones in here are more realistic. It sounds more like actual history than Herodotus, in my opinion. Because a lot of these, like history as we know it, did not exist back then. People would write whatever they wanted, but this, I think, is as close as you can get in those times. That's my. I haven't read everything, so there's probably other works that are similar. But yeah, if you're interested in that time in history, it's very very interesting, and it has a lot of famous people from history like Pericles, and it's really, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I want to reread it again because I've read it ages ago, but it's kind of thick and dense, so I'll wait a while. And then my second favorite classic is The 12 Caesars by Suetonius. So this is my Black Penguin classic. I really like those editions. They're very complete. They're very scholarly. The introductions are helpful as well, and of course, like the notes at the end are super helpful. So I prefer my classics not so pretty, but with the content that I like. This is what I call history. It's mostly like I would call it more like a historical fiction, because he probably was aware of a lot of things that were happening, but there's a lot of things. How would you know that? So this is the story of the Caesars. So it starts with Augustus, well, Julius Caesar, but he was not an emperor. And it starts with Augustus, and it goes through all the further emperors like Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, and there's some of these guys were so freaking crazy. It's so entertaining, and there's like murder and it's amazing. And if you don't feel like reading this, like, because it's still an old writing style, but if you don't really feel like reading this, you can watch the series I, Claudius with Derek Jacobi. It's an old BBC series, so I don't know where you would find it. Maybe on YouTube. I have the DVDs myself because I love it, and it's just basically the history of the 12 Caesars seen through Claudius's eyes, who is the fourth emperor in there, and it's just so entertaining. And these people are just crappy. There's not very few good people, and the ones that are actually good, they usually end up dead. So the 12 Caesars is great. I would recommend like reading I Claudius afterwards, or you can do I Claudius and then the 12 Caesars. They go together. It was inspired by the 12 Caesars, and if you don't like I Claudius, maybe you would like this. I Claudius is written by Robert Graves, but that's more like fiction. I would say more fiction than this. But yeah, it's very entertaining. And then we go to mostly like non-fiction, but someone's retelling of some life events. The first one is 84 Charing Cross Road by Helen Hanff. It's the story, like it's basically a correspondence between her and bookstore in England. The staff of the bookstore, mainly one person, but there are other people that write to her. And she writes starts in 1949, so just after the Second World War. England was very impacted by that war, so she sends goodies over, like she gets book recommendations, or she orders books from that store by letter, and then they send it to her. Most of the books she's talking about I have never read. Some I've never heard of, and probably I will never read them, but it's not important. What's great, it's very short and very sweet, and it's just human interactions through letters, and people who enjoy books and who enjoy kinship, and they all like her. She's very likable, and yeah, it's lovely. And it's just if you want a lift of spirit, your spirit's lifted, I would say read this. It's adorable. And she's very, very funny. Like she writes like, she has her own style of humor, very deprecating. It's really lovely. So I would recommend reading that. It's so short, like why not? And then you have something that's very out of my comfort zone. It's on the Road by Jack Kerouac. This is the original scroll version. So this is a feat. I think he was a genius. He is a genius. It's not my type of literature. It's not my time period that I usually read in. And I prefer anything that's before World War One. Anything after that, it's too young for me. But this was very, very impressive. Like this is the original version, not edited at all, and he wrote that on one scroll of paper. Like he just blurted it all out. And it's so well written. That's what's impressive. It's one of the best written books I've ever read. And there's like a lot of characters in there. They're on the road, and they're guys on the road in the 60s, so you imagine what they're doing. But it's the first backpackers. Well, not the first, but it's essentially backpacking, but in the 60s in the US. So not necessarily extremely likable people, just normal dudes, and they're just experiencing life as they will. But it's so well written. I was enthralled. I could not stop reading it. I swear. And I just can't believe that it got me hooked like that. It's so not my type of subject matter either. So, I don't know. It's very, very impressive. It's worth reading just because of the good writing, the way it's not even edited. I read that version, and I don't know if I would read the other one because all the names are different. These are the real actual names in that book of the real people that he was traveling with. So that's why I don't consider it fiction. It's non-fiction to me because he actually did those things. So So after that, there's another book that I like. I like to read history books, but not necessarily very dry ones. I sorry. So I like David Starkey. He is very like he knows his stuff. He's a real historian, but he's also a bit of a TV personality in England. I think he he's yeah, he's funny. He does not hold back. Let's say, but yeah, for sure he's a good writer of history. He makes it really palatable. He makes it really entertaining, and this is the history of all the kings and queens of England, all up to when England is becomes Great Britain. So that's a whole heck of a lot of history in such a, it's not that big, and it's very well presented. I think it was made into a series, or it's a series of television programs on the BBC, and maybe he wrote the book afterwards, or vice versa. And it reads really like someone who is actually talking to you and presenting, but it's so you see the pictures of what he's telling you. It's very very evocative, and it helped me remember all the kings and queens of England, from William the Conqueror. Like it starts with Alfred actually, and all the way to Queen Anne, and the Glorious Revolution before that. So yeah, it's very very interesting, and it makes it like it's for all the neophyte. Like you don't need to be super well versed in history to read this. Then we go in my favorite category, which is the biographies, autobiographies. It's mostly, I don't read like biographies of rock stars mostly, although that would be entertaining, but I usually go for writers or artists that I like, and they have to be quite old. I don't go for like very recent events. So my first one I've read recently. I've talked about it already on the channel. It's called The Alpine Path by Lucy Maud Montgomery. That's how I know her, Lucy Maud. Now she's known more as L.M. Montgomery. I see all her books are edited that way. But yeah, she's the one who wrote Anne of Green Gables famously, and a lot of other things as well. And she's my favorite, one of my favorite authors. That's the first person I've read when I was a child that really got me into reading. I credit her to getting me into reading, really loving it. And this is the story of, like, she talks about her childhood, and you definitely, if you're a fan of hers, you see where her inspiration for her books was taken from. Definitely her childhood. And she talks about how she got into writing and the process and how she got published. So, but it's also really whimsical and beautifully written, and you have a slice of her life on Prince Edward Island. Just wonderful, wonderful, beautiful. Like it's like a world that's gone, that's no longer there. Like you have a longing for. So I always love reading her, and it's very short as well. I would say probably if you've never read anything from her, that's not the place to start. But if you're a fan of any of her works, definitely pick it up. And then my other, like my favorite, ultimate two favorite biographies of authors I like. So the first one is Eden's Outcast by John Mattison. He actually won the Pulitzer Prize for this because it's extremely well researched and very, very well written. It's lovely. One of the best written books I've ever read as well. And it's, Louisa May Alcott, because, sorry, it's a story, it's a history of Louisa May Alcott, who wrote Little Women, and her father, who was very influential in her life. He was a transcendentalist, hooking up with the likes of Thoreau and Emerson. They were neighbors, and it's very interesting life. I think they were living on a commune in the 19th century, essentially. She was like, I did not picture her life that way. I think she wrote Little Women as more of a utopia or a wishful thinking. Her life was not that, you know, it was similar but not entirely. Her father was quite the character and very domineering in her life, and he got her into a lot of lifestyles that maybe did not suit her that well. He was not a bad person per se, but I think he was very egotistical. So very interesting. It's, you know, you see a world that it's gone. It's gone now. That world. So the 19th century East Coast, like they lived in Concord, Massachusetts, and I did go to visit the house, Orchard House. It's beautiful. I love it so much. But yeah, so definitely I would recommend reading this if you're interested in this time in history, or if you love Little Women. It will give you a lot of insights into the author and her life. One of my favorite quotes is from Louisa May Alcott. She says, "The emerging woman will be strong-willed, strong-minded, strong-souled, and strong-bodied," something like that, because she had a lot of ill health, and I think she felt constrained in her life. Obviously, if you read Little Women, you kind of know that. And I think she saw the future. I'm sorry if you hear banging; it's my kid upstairs. So I think she saw the future of women as better than what she had. Um, she was very enthused, but very interesting. I'm not gonna ramble too much, hopefully. And then we have Beatrix Potter, A Life in Nature by Linda Lear, also extremely well written. Beatrix Potter famously wrote Peter Rabbit and Walt Drew. She was an excellent drawer, and her books are just so lovely. They're just like Lucy Maud Montgomery did the same for me. It's just I didn't have the luck of reading those books when I was a child. They were not really part of our culture here, but I've read them since and just absolutely love them. Like, those drawings are just they're so beautiful. They touch the soul. Like, your child, the child in you, your soul. It's just absolutely perfect. And Beatrix Potter was born in a very, like, socially, I would say, not middle class. She was rich. Her parents were rich, and she could have led a life of leisure and gotten married, and that's it. But she was clever. She was so intelligent, and she got interested in a lot of things. And she even drew scientifically, like she was drawing mushrooms, and she actually has some theories that were scientifically proven that she elaborated. But she was a woman, so she was not allowed to pursue a scientific career. She was not taken seriously, but she was very, very scholarly. Her drawings were perfect. She followed the methods of science at that time in the late 19th century. So yeah, she was completely clever, and she was also artistically inclined, and that's where she found her purpose, I would say, escaping a bit of her life. But she was drawing pictures, and she published books. But if you want to see the movie Miss Potter with Renee Zellweger, is very, very good. I really love that movie. But if you want to know more about Beatrix Potter, like beyond just what she drew, like beyond Peter Rabbit, pick this up. She was a hardy woman living in nature. She ended up in the Lake Districts, and she raised the sheep. Yeah, very, very interesting. So that's my jam. I love that kind of thing, especially from an artist I admire very much. So for that reason, one of the ones I would like to pick up a bit like later would be again with Louisa May Alcott. She wrote it's her journals, because Eden's Outcast made me so interested in her life and in her mind, that I want to read some more of her. Like those are her journals, so that would be more intimate, I would say. At that point, I don't feel bad about reading journals because she's been dead for a long time. I don't think I would do that for someone who's living or has just passed away. And then another one that I'm interested in is same in the same pool because they knew each other is Walden by Henry David Thoreau. So he got emo and he went to live in a shack on Emerson's land for a few years and he wrote. So I'm interested to see what he came up with. I don't know that much about Thoreau. So he was probably a bit antisocial. I don't know. So we'll see. I'm interested in that. So that's a few of the books that I love. Like nonfiction is not my main fare, but I do like to pick one up once in a while. Let me know what your favorite nonfiction books are. If anything that I've talked about, you've read something similar or that you think I would like, just let me know. And see you later.